The Seattle Seahawks just took the top spot in the NFC and somehow still feel more dangerous than people are willing to admit. This was not a lucky season or a cute story. This was a full reset that should have broken a franchise and instead built a scarier version of it. You move off a star like DK Metcalf, hand the offense to Sam Darnold, trust a new staff, and you are supposed to fall apart. Instead, Seattle is sitting as the #1 seed, feet up on the biggest weekend of the year, while everyone else is out there getting punched in the mouth. That is not normal. That is the first warning sign that something bigger is going on here. On offense, it looks simple until you really stare at it. A physical run game that leans on smart blocking and patience. Backs who hit daylight instead of chasing hero runs. And a quarterback in Sam Darnold who finally understands that the most dangerous thing about him is not his arm strength. It is his decision-making when he refuses to throw the game away. When he plays clean, this group squeezes the life out of you. Drives stretch, the clock bleeds, the red zone keeps coming back around, and you can feel defenders starting to break. It is not the loudest offense in the league, but it is built for cold nights, long games, and high-pressure snaps when every mistake feels like a season ender. The wild part is that this is only the surface. Behind it sits a defense shaped by Mike McDonald, loaded with young killers like Devin Witherspoon, Nick Emenwari, Rick Woolen, and a front that hits like it is trying to erase game plans, not just stop them. The numbers quietly push this group right next to some of the best defenses the league has ever seen, and they are doing it without a single so-called headline superstar. That is why the next piece of this story matters so much, because the road to prove all of this runs straight through a familiar problem in their own division. And Seattle is not running from that matchup at all. They are walking toward it. But before we get into that, hit that like and subscribe button for more Seahawks and all the NFL content. Can we get 500 likes on this video? The Seattle Seahawks just watched the bracket fall in a way that most teams would fear, and quietly smiled anyway. A third showdown with the San Francisco 49ers sounds like a nightmare to a lot of fan bases, but in Seattle, it feels more like unfinished business. You know this opponent, you know their habits, you know what their coach wants to do, and that takes a lot of the random chaos out of January football. People keep asking if facing a familiar rival 3 times is risky, but the real question sitting under all of this is simple. What does it say about this Seahawks team that they are actually asking for that smoke instead of hoping for an easier path? The first time these teams met, it turned into one of those late drive gut punch games. Brock Purdy marched his group down the field, hit Jake Tongues for the dagger, and everybody circled the play, where Rick Woolen was a half step away from blowing it up. That was the lesson. The second meeting was something completely different. Seattle took control from the opening snaps, smothered the rhythm, and turned the scoreboard into a slow squeeze that never really let the 49ers breathe, even with only 13 points on the board. Sam Darnold stayed under control. The run game did the heavy lifting, and you could feel San Francisco searching for answers that never came. That is not theory. That is real tape that this locker room can trust. The twist is that a lot of people on the outside still think Seattle should want somebody else. The Eagles feel strange and streaky. The Bears live on wild swings and broken plays, and those kinds of games can flip on one bounce. The 49ers are different. They line up, show you who they are, and try to beat you straight up. And that is exactly the kind of fight the Seahawks roster was built for. The fun part is that the real edge in that kind of matchup does not start with highlight names on offense at all. It starts with something the award voters somehow missed completely, and that is where the story turns next. The strangest thing about this Seahawks season is that one of the most suffocating defenses in football looked invisible on the awards sheet. The Associated Press put together a first-team, all-pro defense packed with names every fan knows. Stars like Myles Garrett, Will Anderson, Micah Parsons, Jeffrey Simmons, Zach Allen, Jack Campbell, Derek Stingley, Quinion Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, Kyle Hamilton, and Kevin Byard, and not a single Seattle player showed up in that group. No Jordan Brooks, no Devin Witherspoon, no Nick Emenwari, nobody from the Pacific Northwest. On paper, the message is simple. Good unit, fun story, but not one defender worth putting on that list. That is the part that should make you stop and look a lot harder at what is really happening in this scheme. When you start digging into the deeper numbers, the story flips from quiet respect to something a lot closer to shock. Across the season, this group sat right alongside some of the best defenses the league has ever tracked in modern metrics. The same kind of territory you think about when people bring up those old Chicago monsters, the legendary Tampa group, the early 90s Philadelphia front that lived in backfields, and those nasty Baltimore and New Orleans units that never gave you air. Recent charts that stack defenses by efficiency over full years keep dropping Seattle near the very top, right next to groups that were loaded with future Hall of Fame names. The difference is that this time, there's no single face driving the numbers. No one player got the credit. That gap between the film and the trophy votes is where you really see Mike Macdonald at work. What he has built in Seattle looks a lot like what Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan did on offense when they first hit the league, only flip to the other side of the ball. The structure is clever, the calls are layered, and everything is designed to make the whole stronger than any one star. It starts in the back with versatile pieces like Devin Witherspoon, Nick Emenwari, Rick Woolen, and Julian Love, then rolls forward into waves of pressure from Leonard Williams, DeMarcus Lawrence, Byron Murphy, Uchenna Nwosu, and the rest of that front. Voters might have missed how special that is, but offenses in the NFC did not. And once you understand that this entire machine is built from the secondary outward, the next question writes itself. What exactly makes that back end so hard to solve for a quarterback like Brock Purdy or any other passer who thinks he knows what he is seeing before the snap? Quarterbacks do not just see coverage when they face the Seattle secondary, they see questions they cannot answer fast enough. Devin Witherspoon plays like a spark in human form. Jumping routes, crashing into screens, closing, space that looked wide open a second earlier. Beside him, Rick Woolen stretches the field with his length, taking away deep shots that most coordinators build their plan around. On the back line, Julian Love reads everything like a veteran point guard. Sliding to spots before the ball is even out of the quarterback hand. And then there is Nick Emenwari, the rookie who drops into the slot, creeps toward the line, drifts deep, and hits with real force while still moving like a cover corner. Together, they do not just defend grass, they erase ideas. What makes this group such a problem in January is how often they change the picture without ever losing control. Before the snap, you might see two safeties deep and think you're getting soft zones. Then Devin Witherspoon rolls down late, Nick Emenwari slides over the top, and suddenly the throw you loved turns into bait. One drive, they are shadowing stars like George Kittle and Christian McCaffrey on option routes. The next they are squeezing timing throws to receivers like Ricky Pearsall along the sideline. They flash pressure from the slot, bail out at the last second, invite the quick throw, then close downhill and turn what looked like an easy gain into a hit that takes the wind out of a drive. It is constant mental strain, and you can see it every time a quarterback double clutches or pulls the ball down against them. The quiet secret is how much this frees up every other level of the defense. When Brock Purdy, or any passer, has to hold the ball that extra beat because Devin Witherspoon has undercut a route, or Rick Woolen has smothered a deep shot, that is another heartbeat for Leonard Williams to win inside, or DeMarcus Lawrence to flatten the edge. When Nick Emenwari disguises a blitz and then fires through a crease, it forces offenses to widen their protection and opens lanes for teammates they never saw coming. The secondary is the pressure that bends the pocket, and the front seven is what slams it shut, which is exactly where this story turns next. The part of this story that almost feels unfair is how heavy the Seahawks can lean on their front when the game gets tight. Leonard Williams is crashing pockets from the inside. DeMarcus Lawrence is bending the edge like a veteran who has seen every trick. And Byron Murphy keeps showing why people in that building talk about him as a long-term anchor, not just a short-term spark. Add in Uchenna Nwosu flying off the other side, and suddenly, quarterbacks are not reading progressions. They are just trying to survive the snap. That is what happened to Brock Purdy the last time these teams met. He was not carving up grass, he was dodging bodies, throwing from awkward platforms, and watching drives stall because he never got to play on his terms. Against the run, this group looks even more cruel. Ernest Jones and Jordan Brooks read blocking schemes like they are reading a menu, sifting through traffic, squeezing cutback lanes, and meeting backs in the alley before they can bounce outside. Drake Thomas throws his body into gaps without hesitation, turning what looked like open daylight for Christian McCaffrey into sudden collisions that changed the tone of a series. When you combine that kind of discipline with the disguised looks Mike McDonald loves to call, everything slows down for San Francisco. One series, they see light boxes and think the ground game is about to roll. The next snap, safeties are screaming downhill and edges are crashing inside. And there is nowhere for Christian McCaffrey to go but sideways. That is how you take a player who usually looks unstoppable and make him look ordinary for long stretches. The scary thing for the rest of the conference is that this front does not have to win games alone anymore. Every pressure that forces Brock Purdy to rush a throw, every hit that makes Christian McCaffrey hesitate, tilts field position in favor of an offense that has not even fully shown what it can be. Because as much as this defense is carrying the reputation right now, the ceiling on Seattle gets a lot higher if Sam Darnold, Kenneth Walker, Jackson Smith-Njigba, and Rashid Shaheed all fire at the same time. And that is where the real tension in this playoff run starts to build. The wild part about this Seattle story is that the defense is getting all the headlines, while the offense is sitting on extra power it has not even shown yet. Most people look at the scores, see comfortable wins with modest totals, and assume this group is just along for the ride. That picture is lazy. When you really study what is happening, you see an attack that is still learning how to use all of its weapons together. Sam Darnold has finally landed in a system that protects him. Instead of exposing him, Kenneth Walker has grown into a patient finisher instead of a boom or bust runner, and the rest of the league has not fully adjusted to what that means in a playoff setting where every snap is tight and every mistake feels bigger than it really is. At the center of it all is a run game that is much smarter than it looks at first glance. The line fires off in unison, double teams climb with purpose, and Kenneth Walker now trusts the design instead of bouncing at the first sign of color. He presses the hole, waits that half heartbeat, then explodes through lanes that were drawn up on Wednesday and opened on Sunday. That rhythm changes everything for Sam Darnold. Play action becomes honest. Linebackers hesitate, and the throws he is asked to make are clear, defined, and on time. When he plays that version of himself, the one who takes what is there and does not hand the ball back for free, Seattle does not just control the clock. They lean on defenses until you can see bodies sagging and hands on hips late in the fourth quarter. The part that should make defensive coordinators nervous is that the passing game still has room to climb. Jackson Smith-Njigba wins the small battles that do not show up in flashy highlights, snapping off routes at the sticks, settling in soft spots, and bailing the offense out on third and long when the whole stadium knows the ball has to be in the air. On the other side, Rashid Shaheed is sitting there with rare speed, already punishing teams in the return game, waiting for the moment the staff decides to build whole series around his deep threat instead of just sprinkling him in. Once those two are fully tied into what Sam Darnold and the ground game are doing, this offense stops being a quiet passenger and starts looking like a unit that can win shootouts if it has to. And that is where the next layer of pressure shows up, because all of this potential lives in a playbook that might be in someone else's hands next year. And the future of that call sheet is already turning into a story of its own. The Seattle Seahawks are winning on Sundays, But the quieter battle they are fighting is in meeting rooms and interview hotels. Every time another team calls about Clint Kubiak, they are not just asking about a play caller. They are trying to pull a piece out of the structure that just carried Seattle to the top seed. That is how you know this project is real. When decision makers in other buildings look at this offense, at how it protects Sam Darnold, at how it leans into the strengths of Kenneth Walker, Jackson Smith-Njigba, and Rashid Shaheed, and decide they want the architect for themselves, that is a sign of respect wrapped in risk. You can feel the tension in that. Keep the voice that built this playbook, or cash in the proof that Seattle is now the spot coordinators want on their resume. The thing that keeps this from turning into panic is the man at the top of the defensive side. Mike Macdonald knows exactly how this game works. He watched it with Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan, when every assistant who shared an office with them started getting promotions across the league. He understands that if Clint Kubiak stays, the language and timing keep growing on offense. And if he leaves, Seattle instantly becomes one of the most attractive jobs any offensive mind could take. You're talking about a roster that has a smart line, a physical back in Kenneth Walker, a poised passer in Sam Darnold, and young targets like Jackson Smith-Njigba and Rashid Shaheed. Play designers see that and start imagining what they could draw up. That is leverage, not crisis, as long as the head coach is strong enough to demand the same core philosophy from whoever sits in that chair next. On defense, the stakes are just as high, only the moves are different. Assistants like Aiden Durda and Justin Hines have helped unlock new levels from Leonard Williams, DeMarcus Lawrence, Byron Murphy, and Uchenna Nwosu, and other teams are not blind to that. If one of them gets pulled away or promoted, Macdonald has to decide whether to promote from inside to keep the language tight, or pull a fresh voice from outside and trust his own system to absorb it. Every choice shapes how long this window stays open. Stack the right hires, and you become the place where great coaches and great players want to live for years. Miss on one, and the noise starts creeping back in about whether this was a one-year flash. That is where the next part of this story waits. Because even with all this coaching talent in the building, there is still one question about this team that fans keep dodging. The Seattle Seahawks are riding a defense that feels good enough to carry them through anyone, but the real test is coming for Sam Darnold when the game turns messy, and that group cannot save every mistake. At some point in this playoff run, the flags, tipped passes, and broken coverages will swing against them, and the season will come down to whether Sam Darnold can trade punches without giving the ball away against chaos quarterbacks like Josh Allen, Bo Nix with Sean Payton behind him, or C.J. Stroud and a fearless Texans team. If Seattle fights through an NFC West rival, survives master coaches like Sean McVay or Kyle Shanahan, then beats one of those AFC threats on the biggest stage, they stop being a fun surprise and become the standard everyone else is chasing. And we will know for sure whether this talk about Mike Macdonald, defense, and a new version of Sam Darnold was hype or the start of a new era.